Hello to everyone joining us on another episode of Deconstructed. Ever so briefly, just to go through a little bit of introductions before I bring our wonderful guest in. My name is Sai, and I am a, if you will, business coaching consultant where I focus on transformation, partnering with organizations to really help them calibrate their business models and operating models to achieve the impact they have in the world. Our topic for today is going to be if you will, around the art of war, and very specifically in the game of soccer as we know it here in the States, or football as we know it in the rest of the world. Before I go ahead and bring our guest in, let me mention a few comments about Liam, an incredible gentleman who's already participated on a number of panels on the topic. So it's great to have him really focus even more deeply on his area. He's currently the executive director at the Carolina Soccer Center of Excellence, which he'll definitely bring us into the fold on there. He's a coach at this point, definitively has qualifications from the United States Soccer Federation, the United Soccer Coaches, and also the English Football Association. And the beauty of our conversation with Liam likewise is not only the art of war, but he's also been a player at Berry College in Georgia. So we definitely will have a very, very unique experience with the fine gentleman. We'll also mention his book was published in 2021, Sun Tzu Soccer, The Art of War in Soccer Language and Scenarios, which we'll dive into. Something that really captivated me about Shannon, Liam if you will, Shannon, is in his book, he talks about the first time translating the art of war directly to the beautiful game, as he refers to it. And he says it reads exactly as the art of war would read if the art of war were written specifically for soccer. So very, very definitively, very much been looking forward to this conversation. And I have not done the man justice. Please welcome Liam to the conversation.
Hey,
how are you, dear sir?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. How are you doing?
All good, my good friend. Definitively been looking forward to this conversation and getting into all the details and learning from your mapping and what have you. But to kind of start off, please, I did not do you justice. Who is Liam?
You're too kind. You're too kind. Well, as you mentioned, I coach at the moment my own little soccer club, which was full time. Is now it's now part time, but it's still running seasonally. I also coach for Charlotte Soccer Academy here in town. I coach my son and I coach another team for them. So still keeping my finger slightly on the pulse. You can talk and you can write, but nothing quite beats getting out onto the field and putting your cleats on and coaching and kicking the ball around with the kids. So I'm still doing that. As you mentioned, I wrote my book and published it in 2020. I actually wrote it in 2011, and it took all that time to finally push the button and say enough is enough. I'm going to publish it. I think like almost every author, you have this pridefulness that you want to get a publisher. It's just different to get, well, first of all, to have, a powerhouse organization working for, behind you to market your product. But more than that, to have somebody believe in you, so you got that pridefulness. But I quickly learned, well, not so quickly, 9 years. Took me 9 years to swallow that pride and say, you know what, I'm going to push the button on this. I've waited long enough, and excuse me. I made the right decision. When it was published, my book was #1 on Amazon in new releases for its category. So that was validation right there. I knew I'd done the right thing. So yeah. Since then, I've done a few of these chats, obviously with your good self, and I've been interviewed, I don't know, a dozen different times, either on podcasts or or, on coaching channels about the book, about Sun Tzu himself, and, the art of war's timelessness.
Yeah, definitely. So Liam, before too long, I have to encourage folks to go out to Amazon and take a look at the incredible picture with you and your son on the author page. I absolutely love that picture.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's wonderful.
I appreciate that.
So my good friend, tell us kind of, how did the idea of applying the art of war to the sport of soccer really, kind of get into your bloodstream?
Yeah. Well, it's, I think it's a good story. I was a government and history major in college, and the art of war was assigned for one of my classes, and I briefly, looked over it, as you do in college. I didn't read it, I think, intensively, but I knew I did what I had to do for class. But I kept the book. I knew it was a great book. I knew of its reputation, and it's one of those things that I held on to after I graduated. And years later, I found myself coaching soccer full time, and I had a little bit of downtime. And what do you know? The art of war was in my desk. So pulled it out, decided to have a little read, and then that was it. Just jump off the page about how directly the strategies could be applied. The quote I've got on the back of my book is right here. I got it nice and handy. Making no mistakes is what guarantees victory, because it means defeating an opponent that is already defeated. And years later, thousands of years later, one of the most respected soccer coaches of all time, probably the most influential figure in the game of all time, Johan Cruyff, said something almost identical. He said, this is a game of mistakes. The team that makes the least mistakes usually wins. And I've got those two quotes side by side on the back cover of my book. And that really is the most direct, concise example that I can think of. But all through the book, there are, it's just literally, it's one after the other, where you don't even need, in some parts, much translation at all. I don't want to say it wasn't hard work. It was hard work at times, but at times it wasn't hard work. And I mean that with full compliments towards Sun Tzu, because that's how great the book is. That I could take it, and if I could leave it alone, if I could leave a quote or a chapter, a verse pure, then I would leave it. If I didn't have to change it, I wouldn't change it. So anyway, I took the book, to get back to your question. I took the book, and it leapt off the idea just leapt off the page to me. And I think one of my friends at the time somewhat sarcastically said, you talk about this thing so much, why don't you write about it? And I was like, you know what? That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Nice.
And that was that.
Beautiful. And I think you're really emphasizing the naturalness of the Sun Tzu. The wisdom is very natural. So knowing your craft the way you know your craft, it just naturally manifests. I think that's incredible, quite honestly.
Yeah. We discussed before in our last talk, in the panel discussion, how whenever two forces meet one another, you're talking about conflict, and we talked that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you're talking about two opposing sides, competing for the same target, the same goal. Two forces against one another. And with sports, that's just, you have a version of warfare. That's what sports are. They're a much more civilized way of going about, proving a point. But essentially, that's what you have: one side, one person, one team, fighting against another to see who comes out on top.
Beautifully said. I like that, civilized, if you will, warfare. I love the way that you describe it. Kind of help us sort of, really begin to understand. We commonly talk about the five, if you will, fundamentals: Tao, heaven, earth, general, and the method, if you will. How does that map directly into sort of the field of soccer?
I'm just grabbing my book right now because I was looking at that. There we go. I was looking at that earlier on. So in my translations, I have harmony, nature, circumstance, the coach, and method and discipline. Those, I think. So I did change. I kept the 5 core principles that Sun Tzu mentioned, because this is what the work is supposed to be. This is what my work is supposed to be. It's a reflection of his, written for soccer. So, like I said, I want to keep structure, keep the same terminology if I could. But for this particular one, I don't know what your favorite translation is, but I used Lionel Giles's translation from Barnes and Noble, the Classics edition.
Yep.
That was my favorite. And so the moral law I translated into harmony. Yep. So in soccer, what I believe that represents is an organization, personnel having faith that no matter what the instructions are, they're going to be followed. Being at peace, I guess, in the organization. That's what I think harmony represents, and that's the first core value. And wrote that, or when I translated it, I thought about it, and it came to be something I really believed. And I still do believe, this. I wanted to translate the book, and I loved the book, but was I really a devotee or a disciple to it? I don't know that I was, until I started the process, of actually writing it.
So Liam, it brings up an interesting question in my mind. As you did the mapping, the translation, the interpretation, there's many words that we can use, if you will. What did it teach you about yourself, would you say, that sort of almost surprised you, even potentially?
Wow, that's a really good question. It definitely taught me that I needed to practice what I preached. It taught me that I needed to have a lot more thorough outlook, a lot clearer, defined philosophies and methodologies than I had. Nothing really surprised me other than how insightful the work was. The more I got into it, like I said, the more in tune I became. And I don't know if disciple is the right word for it, but I went from, I think, a fan of the book to a real devotee to the book.
So I really appreciate the way you're describing, because practicing what you teach, exactly like you said, broadening the outlook, and then really becoming in tune with whatever context in which you're applying it. In this case, it's specifically the area of soccer, but much more in tune with the reality of the game is kind of what I'm picking up on, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of this is done for a reason. Ultimately, everything that Sun Tzu wrote, is for a reason. It's to put it into practice. And the best way of, he's pretty clear, the best way to conduct warfare is to not conduct warfare.
Yeah.
But you can say that about some games. The best way to play is probably not to play them when two teams are like so outmatched. But obviously, that's not the way that this goes. That's not the way that that sport runs. You draw your competitor and then you play against them. So everything is very practical. As brilliant and as insightful and as poetic. And how differential we can be with our interpretations. Ultimately, the book is written for a reason, and for me, the soccer version is written for a reason. It's to be followed, and I say that with humility.
Yeah, and if I kind of play back sort of when I read your book, and the thing that I really walked away with, as much as we talk about the art of war, achieving victory without aggression, if you will, and those terms, it's really playing with integrity, honoring the sport, honoring your competitor, honoring your talent, if you will, both individually and collectively as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's pretty clear in The Art of War. And it was very easy to translate for soccer to win your games and to do so with humility and with compassion, to treat defeated opponents with respect. That might be a direct quote that it's definitely a quote from my book. I'd have to look it up to see that if it was a direct quote from Sun Tzu that I just left completely unchanged. But to treat defeated opponents with respect is incredibly important. And there is, I feel, with Sun Tzu, there was compassion and honor, but also everything's extremely practical. It makes a lot more sense to treat defeated opponents with respect, so you don't unleash unnecessary repercussions back on yourself because you've aggravated them to the point that they have nothing to lose, and all they have is retribution. And within soccer, you do see this play out with, what's commonly called showboating. Showboating is a term that can apply to any sport, and people usually, teams or players usually engage in it when they've defeated an opponent. They wait until the victory is guaranteed, and then they start having some fun. Well, it's only fun for one side. Yeah. And I've played in those games, on an amateur level, where a team has been soundly beaten and has not been provoked and still lashes out due to frustration, and I found myself in those situations. I found myself now thinking back, like, how bad could it have been if you had provoked? Because you can't control other people. You can't control, other teams or organizations or other armies. You can obviously influence them, but I have wondered since, like, and I won't play it back. It's but there's a very, very clear example in my mind from when I played. I'm thinking this team just totally lost their minds when we were playing against them, and didn't like it at all, and we weren't showboating. But if you do, then be prepared for the repercussions, and that's the practical side of Sun Tzu as well. It's I like to think that it starts from a place of nobility and decency and honor, but the practicality is also there.
Yeah. And I truly think that's one of the power of the wisdom, is that it integrates the ethical, the moral, and the practical, where a lot of people feel like there's a very hard line between the two, and they start to respectfully, as I like to say, sell their soul one way or another, and call it under the guise of being practical. When the reality is, no, don't sell your soul, but be practical.
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely agree with that.
So my good friend, I know in kind of learning more about you created, if you will, player development curriculums and club operating manuals. So kind of, you've done so much. What's been the response as you've leveraged or introduced Sun Tzu to others in the world as such?
Yeah, it's been good. The last time we spoke, I was doing some consulting based on the book, down with a semi-professional outfit in South Carolina. That's been positive. I would like to do more of what you do, more consulting work with the art of war, as a theme. Of course, I'm a little bit limited in terms of who I could go and do that to, because there's only a set amount of soccer organizations around. But no, I think the results have been good. Probably my proudest moment has been when I have bumped into people and they said that they have my book and they've used my book. They've read my book before games to get advice. They've read it on the coaches who have said they've read it on the bus towards a game to try and get some idea towards it. I ran into a coach who was a former player of mine. It's always nice when that happens, but also a scary reflection of how fast time goes. So I bumped into him in a restaurant probably a year ago. And he said he got my book, and I was like, well, that's wonderful. Thanks so much. I appreciate the support. And he was like, yeah, I keep passages of it and read them before games. I was like, well, that's just like, it was nice of you to get it. I'm sure a lot of people might have got it just to be nice, but the fact that it's being used, that's incredible. I know it was used in a master's of soccer coaching, because a gentleman approached me and told me this, and actually sent me his work. So that was a huge honor.
Definitely, to exactly to your point, to get it, to use it to prime us before we're going into a game, and we're going, to whether it's a tournament of sorts or what have you, but as a priming instrument, that's a very, very huge compliment, quite honestly.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's all you can ask for, right? I try to tell myself that. Obviously, I want I want a lot, but really, realistically, if you're looking inside yourself, the book's being used for what I wanted it to be used for. And if only 1, 2, a dozen people are doing that, then still that's a dozen people whose lives I've touched. It'd be great if it was thousands, but you don't get into projects like this, without your heart being in it, and just to have reached one person is very meaningful.
Very, very, very well said. So before getting kind of even deeper into the work itself, it's very, very powerful to dive into a little bit of your perspective between a player and a coach, because you've been on both sides of the equation. And how did you experience that shift, if you will? How did you experience the art of war relative to that shift as well? We're very, very interested in that.
Well, When I was a player, you know, for most of my time when I was at my, I want to say, peak, you know, or until I hadn't read The Art of War, so it didn't have an effect on me in that regard. Looking back, I was always a very, I think, practical player. I have very specific beliefs in how the game should be played. I like possession. I like combination play. I like support. I like what they call tiki-taka soccer, which is exactly what it sounds like: short, quick passes and movement around the ball. You know, I vow, and that would say definitely. I coach the same way that I played. I'm just more aware of it now, of what that involves. In terms of The Art of War, it would indicate that I like to be in control and I like to take the initiative, which is what Sun Tzu, you know, wrote about. You know, and that was his advice, and I think that that's solid advice, to be the first in everything, to compete the first, to take the initiative, and that's how I feel having possession of the ball is. You know, you can't, you can influence the game without the ball. You can definitely do that. And there are ways to play while not being in a high possession team of winning. And lots of people do this. But from my point of view, it's just not something that I can handle very well, because it runs counter to my belief of how the game should be played. I think soccer's called the beautiful game. It should be enjoyable to play. It should be enjoyable to watch. I know that's very idealistic. And I know when you're operating at the top end of the business, maybe you can't, you know, adhere to your philosophies 100% of the time. You need to adapt. I totally get that. But with my beliefs being as they are, and I think my beliefs are supported by Sun Tzu's writings, I do have, as a coach, like I said, specific ideas of how the game should be played. And they're similar. They're really similar to how I was as a player. Very, I was slightly risk adverse. I was very practical. I liked to be patient. Yeah, all of those things. But like I said, probably the biggest difference between playing and coaching now, having studied the book in between, is just that awareness.
Would you say, Liam, that sense of awareness gives you a greater ability to have an impact in the way that you do, whether you're coaching or playing for that matter, but greater ability to have impact and be able to navigate the field, the plays, and kind of really sort of be a better practitioner, for lack of better words?
I do, and I think I appreciate the question. I haven't been asked it before, at least not in the way that you've asked it, and I think I would go so far as to say, take awareness and turn that into self-awareness. Like, is being self-aware an advantage in playing, coaching, teaching, executing, whether it's soccer, business, warfare? Like, being self-aware is everything. Being aware on the field is knowing what's going on all around you. That's the practical side of it. Obviously, being self-aware as a person is a lot more complex. There's a lot more nuances, of course, but how do we improve? How do we improve if we're not self-aware? Humility and self-awareness, I think, go hand in hand. And without those qualities, I really think an individual or an organization, an army, is hobbled, really hindered in terms of growth and in terms of potential achievements. And what I learned from the art of war, the broadest way I can describe it, is that there's people that are cleverer than I am. There's people that have likely had the same ideas of me, just they've had them before. So you're not the first person to think of this. And that is humbling, but being humbled is a good thing. It helps that self-awareness, and I think if you accept it the right way, then it can really facilitate your willingness and openness to learn. So yeah, awareness is everything, I think.
I really love the expression, accept it, the right way. And if you accept it from the perspective of opening yourself up with a willingness to learn, is a very, very powerful message and takeaway from leveraging the art of war.
Yeah.
So, Liam, the other question that comes to my mind is, definitively you've dealt with different age groups and what have you. Have you seen sort of any insights as you've leveraged the art of war in the sport relative to the age categories or what have you? And respectfully, I don't know the sport well enough to understand the age categories and those facets.
In theory, no. In practice, yes. I actually think that you have to, as teams get older, as they get more advanced, as you get to a higher level, you have to simplify even greater as a teacher. And that's because ultimately what you're doing, if you're doing things right, is building on knowledge that's already there. So, it's like a pyramid. All the work comes in at the bottom, and then it gets more nuanced and as you go up. But it's that pyramid shape. I don't know if I'm describing it well, but all the complexity comes in at the bottom, and then you just work it up, because at the top level, players need very, very few instructions. So the instructions that you do give have to be very specific, very non-open to interpretation, which if you think about the art of war, and if you think about warfare, you think about what Sun Tzu was talking about. You think about it in military terms. If you're operating at the top level of, say, the military, are you going to be getting more or less instructions to complete a mission than you would if you're setting about training? Well, in your training, it's going to be non-stop. You're going to be hit non-stop. But when you're going out on special forces missions, you don't need to be told all these details. You need to be told, hey, this is what you need to do, go do it, end of story. With maybe a little twist, like right here. And that's how it is in soccer. The higher level you go up, the higher the age group, the older it is. Just the more you have to hit the nail on the head. And it's just one nail.
Very beautifully said.
I hope so. I know what I wanted to say. I don't know if I got it out well enough.
I think your expression is very powerful, because really the more experience someone has, the more knowledge, the more nuances that they already have in them, if you will, that they've internalized, for lack of better words, even potentially more nuance. You have to simplify the delivery of the message. And that is part of the beauty, quite honestly, of reading so many variations of translation of The Art of War, is that they hit in different ways. So ultimately something's going to hit the nail exactly as you described, Liam.
What was I hope you don't mind me asking you, like in this, just with a back and forth conversation, but what's your favorite version, or do you have one? Do you have a particular translation that you like?
So I too started with Giles, exactly as you mentioned, and throughout the years, the Denma translation for me has become very potent because of the crispness of the translation and the way that I have seen, quite honestly, leaders in organizations be able to internalize both the essays in the Denma translation as well as the translation itself much more readily. So it enters the bloodstream very naturally.
Really?
And I use all the translations, but that one has proven very, very distinct in my practice.
So I've got I don't think I have that, and I think I've got 8 different versions of The Art of War, and that's one that I don't have. So I'm gonna look that one up, see if I can get something from it myself.
Definitely, my friend, definitely. So I'd like to sort of kind of get your thoughts around sort of very specific things as people pick up The Art of War, as people pick up your book. We look at the last chapter, and the last chapter is about spies, if you will. How does that now translate into the world of soccer for those that are listening to us at this point?
So I started off with, and it's strange that was left to last, because Sun Tzu put such a high emphasis on it, on the importance of the use of spies. And I wonder if that's why he did leave it to last, as sort of a real punch to end the work. It's not a particularly long chapter, but it's very powerful. And as Sun Tzu's talking about the use of spies, he says that they should be treated better than anybody else in your organization. You should be very deferential to them. He does say that you should conceal your plans from them. And I'm paraphrasing here, but take what they say with a pinch of salt, but be extremely deferential, because through the use of spies, this is the only true way that you get information, and that information is what you're going to use to construct your own plans. And I think he said, you can't get intelligence through wishful thinking or through prayers, I think is the translation I remember. And I was like, that's so funny. That sounds so modern day, like, hey, you can't pray your way to victory, it's amazing how current that sounds to me. But in terms of soccer, I translated it to, first of all, I started off with scouting, because that is a very soccer specific term, scouting. But I thought that was too specific. So I used the word intelligence. So instead of the use of spies, I used the word intelligence, more of, which still obviously has military connotations, the gathering of intelligence, or intelligence gathering. But it is about, obviously, in soccer terms, going out and using your resources to observe others, training habits, game habits, to do so in a very legal and ethical way, I should say. Because there's an example of this that just occurred in the Olympics, of not doing that in an ethical and legal way, and some people got into very big trouble over it. I'll mention that in a minute. In case, had you heard about that?
I have not. Please share.
I'll tell you about it in a second. But yeah, basically going out and observing ethically and correctly the opposition, what they're doing, their styles, their habits, their systems. Also, Sun Tzu talks about the turning of spies. So when people come to spy on you, turn them around. I'm trying to think of this. He had five different I think variations of spying, and there's one in particular where you turn where you turn those who are coming to work against you to work for you, because they have the most information, of course, about your opponents. One of those areas I definitely got I translated into journalism, into modern days. Like, journalists are good spies. They're good gatherers of intelligence, use them to your advantage. Even on Ted Lasso, one of the stars is a journalist who eventually comes to work for them, adds a little bit of, a different perspective and insight. That's a use of spies. But in terms of intelligence gathering, yeah, at the Olympics, just a few weeks ago, the Canadian head coach, the women's coach for Canada, has been banned, I think, for I want to say 1 year, maybe 2, because drones were being sent over another nation's training facility. It escapes me what the other country was. It might have been more than one, but the head coach lost her job, and there was one other individual that lost their job that I know of, and have been suspended by FIFA, the world governing body, because their method of intelligence gathering was not legal. I mean, the idea was the right thing. You're trying to get as much information as you can. I mean, that shows how important it is, but there are lines that you're not supposed to cross, and they most definitely did.
Very well said. Very well said. And another chapter, excuse me, that comes to my mind is chapter 12, if you will, attack by fire. How does that begin to translate into the world of soccer?
It's funny that you ask about that, because you and I haven't spoken about that one before.
Yeah.
And there's a very easy answer to this, and that's that it doesn't. I couldn't do it. I tried my hardest, using my imagination and all the flowery metaphors that I could use, and I couldn't. It's so specific, the attack by fire. I mean, he's literally talking about fire. There's not really much left to interpretation there. So the attack on fire was the one chapter that I couldn't translate. What I did do is I chopped up chapter 10, and I broke that into 2 pieces, and I replaced the attack with fire, or attack by fire, with the second half of chapter 10, which is very much about management. He with chapter 10, it's weird that I thought, hold on one second while I look it up. Where he's talking about areas of the field.
Yeah.
And one half of it is dedicated to areas of the field. It's very specific, and you can change that, and I did change it into soccer specific terms, but half of it was talking almost solely about management. So to keep it to 13 chapters, which I wanted to do, that's how I changed it. But that is definitely worth noting as a difference in my book. Mm-hmm. If someone were to be an expert on the art of war, or even familiar on the art of war, and pick it up and think, okay, I'm going to look at chapter 12, they would be in for a shock.
Yeah.
but yeah, I couldn't do it. Si, it was yeah. I mean, a better person than me might be able to really use their imagination, but I wasn't able to change it.
I think it's very powerful in the way you express it, quite honestly, Liam. I want to ask about one more chapter, and then I've got a few other questions that I definitely want to cover in the time we have.
Yeah.
You know, chapter 5, if you will, the use of energy.
Yeah.
You know, can you share a little bit with our listeners, if you will, around that?
I will. So I changed that into methods, the use of energy into methods. The use of is talking about how to best use your resources, you know, and therefore I thought methods is a good way to describe that. There's talking of flowery language. There is a lot, you know, in here, talking about how many methods of attack there are, you know, direct and indirect. And when we mentioned before in the panel discussion, direct methods, I said, you know, in soccer, you're looking at 3 direct methods. You're looking at going long, going over a team, going through a team, or going wide, you know, and attacking. And these all translate to warfare. If you think about it, you know, you can go high with planes, you can go wide, you know, and attack on the flanks, or you can, you know, directly with a cavalry charge through the middle. These are all direct methods. And you need those methods, because, and I think that this is a direct quote, direct methods give way to indirect methods. Mm-hmm. And the indirect methods, I believe, I mentioned earlier how I have very specific ideas on how like the game should be played. I like possession. I like combination play. I like being in control of the ball. I like things to look pretty. And to me, that's what indirect methods are. They're more art than, you know, or as much art as they are science. You know, we discussed how do you prep for that, and it's very difficult because in soccer, no one situation or no 2 situations are ever exactly the same. So you have to train the players as best you can, give them certain sets of circumstances, and then let them in a game execute. But those are the indirect methods. And I would translate, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. Over, around, and through are direct. Mm-hmm. But in terms of indirect, it's also going through, but it's not going it's not going laterally. It's not going, you know, in a straight line. We're more bouncing around, going from one place to the other. I guess in terms of warfare, you could almost consider it like a guerrilla warfare almost tactic of mm-hmm. hit here, hit here, hit here, hit here, you know, always keeping moving, always keeping your opponent, the enemy, guessing, always keeping them wondering. But that would be going through in an indirect fashion. So those are the methods. And that's how I translated the use of energy. Yeah. And you know, because I know when I first read your translation, exactly as to your point, the combination plays, if you will, really right. are the ordinary and extraordinary, and the variation that comes into play as you are exercising the different combination of plays and what have you. So it's very, very powerful mapping, if you will. Yes.
So I'll tell you, there's something that's extremely elegant in the way that you described your journey and what have you, in that, especially when we talk about the use of spies, as you did your interpretation and translation, Liam, you struggled. So there's a natural growth that comes of that struggle. So my question, I think as people listen to our conversation is words of wisdom to others who are taking the art of war and trying to interpret it, translate it into different domains, even beyond soccer. But any words of wisdom relative to what the journey has been like from there?
Well, I hate to be unoriginal, but hard work and patience are where it started. I know that is maybe cliche, but I think it's cliche for a reason. There were times when it was, like I said, simple, and I mean that because the work itself is so incredible. It made it simple, but there are times I wish I could remember what chapter it was, but I was struggling for I would say for a good couple of weeks. I eventually had to take a couple of breaks, come back, work on it again, clear my head, go watch some soccer.
Yeah.
And just be patient with it. I would also say don't leave those parts till the end. Like, work through what you can work through. The art of war, isn't what's the word? It's a treatise. It's not a novel. You don't need to read it from page 1 to page 130. So you can pick a chapter at a time. And I would say that some chapters would be naturally easier to translate and interpret into other areas than others. And I would hit those first. It's been so long, honestly, I can't remember, Si, if I did that. Looking back, that's absolutely the advice that I would give to somebody else. Like, this is not a novel. This is a treatise. So get the bits that you can get right, and then they will likely lend further wisdom to the harder parts later down the road when you get to them.
Yeah. I think that truly words of wisdom, because exactly to your point, it may seem simple, but even more so, it's elegant, and you will achieve a degree of growth from that. And then what is not simple, you will struggle through and likewise achieve a degree of growth. And it is as
that's right there. That was nice.
So I wholeheartedly, I think that there's a lot of value in what you've done and the experience that you've gone through, especially from a player perspective and a coach perspective, Liam. And as a treatise, as a treatise, I always tell people it's a labyrinth. It's a labyrinth to be explored and
right.
to really grow from. So definitively. My good friend, we've got a few more minutes left. Anything that you want to share with us, with the audience, as we begin toward our sign off, but any closing comments, anything at all that you'd like to share with us, Liam?
Well, I always want to say thank you for taking the time to chat to me, Si. I appreciate it. I appreciate you reaching out, and I appreciate your passion for this. Your passion gives me renewed energy. So thank you for that. And thanks for the invitation to be on here. I really appreciate it. I don't get to talk about it enough, and so I am really grateful for the opportunity, because it helps remind me of the work that I poured so much effort into. I'm grateful for the opportunity to come on here and chat, and hopefully somebody somewhere learn something, or it sparked an interest in somebody somewhere. If one person gets something from it, I appreciate that.
My pleasure, my friend. The pleasure is truly all mine, all ours to get a little bit of time with you. By all means, the thing that I would emphasize is, Liam, you've impacted a lot of lives, and definitively the world, as you and I know, isn't always a good reminder of the lives that we've impacted as human beings. So definitively, you've got a huge champion in me, my good friend. Keep up the good work. And I'm sure, and I can't wait to see what's next. I guess I'll put it that way, my good man.
I appreciate it. And well, you'll be the first to know when I hit one of those goals.
Beautiful. Most definitely, man. You got a huge champion in me. So by all means, thank you, Liam. Thank you for everyone that's joined us, likewise live, and others who are listening to the recording. I'll say, Liam, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Okay, yeah, definitely to get onto my website, because that has all the different ways of contacting me. I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram, but you can get to me through all of those via my website, which is liamjshannon.com. So that's the best way to get to me. It has an email address there as well. So yeah, please, if anyone has anything that they want to reach out to me about, then go to the website and just pick away.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you again, Liam. Thank you for everyone who's joined us, and we'll look forward to much more as we continue the journey. Thank you again.
Thanks, Si. Bye.
Bye now.